Drumbeat of War. The top of the desk is a thin slab of blue and green marble flecked with gold. Everything is in its place, and a place for everything. Pens neatly in a beautiful ceramic holder, parchment pages neatly piled in a shallow box, a wickedly sharp mother-of-pearl handled letter opener in exactly the right place. The only thing that might be out of place is a high-sided oval plate, on which are piled a number of lapis lazuli stones. Smooth and round, they are rumoured to be impossible to count. Some peculiar little trinket that Lady Madriana recovered from a sunken ruin near Maracossa in her youth, when she was more adventurous. The noise they make as she sifts through them idly is distracting to her guest. Another benefit as far as the ambassador is concerned. In truth, though, she plays with them because doing so allows her to concentrate, when what she actually wants to do is shout at people for being so stupid. "Whose idea was it to get the twins involved?" she asked. The woman on the other side of the desk stiffens, sits up straighter in her chair. "With all due respect," she begins to bluster, "the Tarquinius—" "Nobody liked the Tarquinius," interrupts Madriana, keeping her temper on a short leash. She wants to shout at her guest, but doing so would just cause more troubles. "Those idiot zealots did the plenum a favour, and we both know it, so spare me from the crocodile tears on their behalf." The woman bristles. She forces the words out through clenched teeth. "Regardless, murdering the family when they are at their villa celebrating in the middle of a feast, it cannot stand. Assassination is a blunt knife. Yes, I know the adage as well as you do, and perhaps you can see why it might pertain to our current situation." Madriana interrupts again. She is idly wondering how many times she can speak over the honourable adept Uranami before she gets angry enough to end the meeting. "The priesthood of Tlang and Sanit are a necessary evil and a blight. I know this. You know this. The families know this." Lady Madriana is becoming agitated, her fingers moving more swiftly in the little platter of innumerable stones. She catches herself, calms herself. "There is a reason that the temples are controlled, the priests marked. That they are not permitted to set foot on the Moria. In all honesty, I am not that concerned that someone has seen fit to make the offerings and ask for the intercession of the curved blade and the false smile." Uranami shifts slightly in her seat, confirming without speaking Madriana's suspicion that it is more than just the Iudani that have paid the leaden price demanded by the Temple of Crimson Vengeance and Black Ambition. It genuinely doesn't worry her that they have been sent to kill imperial senators. From long experience, she knows that senators, archmages, cardinals, all are replaced as swiftly as they fall. As an actual strategy, it is mostly pointless. All it will do is strengthen imperial resolve, will add fuel to those who talk about the need to force Asavea to embrace their way. It's inconvenient. Worse, every time someone employs assassins, it makes it that much easier for them to do it again. It is only a matter of time before some hot-blooded young idiot decides they can get what they believe is owed to them with the aid of the Veiled Temple, and she knows only too well where that leads. A spasm of violence until the grown-ups get bored and are forced to take action. It's the last thing anyone wants right now. Not really her problem, but she makes a note to mention it to some of her allies in the older houses. Those who have the most to lose. "Ah well," she sighs. It's too late to do anything now, and realistically it makes her job a little more difficult. She rallies. "Thank you for your time, Mistress Uranami. You can tell your mother that there is no more to say on the matter. But before you go, I understand the Breath of Crimson is already underway. But if it would not be too much trouble, could you ask the captain of the Foam Follower to visit me if she has time? I have some dispatches for the Empire, and I know the two of you are close." Mistress Uranami does not like Madriana, but she knows better than to refuse an instruction dressed up as a polite request. The ambassador sits for several more minutes, running the little stones through her finger, enjoying their smoothness and their littleness. Then she pulls some parchment towards her. It's time to, yet again, try to get the Empire to understand exactly who they are dealing with. Overview. Each season, the civil service prepares a summary of the Empire's relationship with the foreign nations, based on communications received from their ambassador, along with any useful intelligence gathered from other sources. While the Senate and the other houses of imperial power may respond to these offers, it is important to note that it is the appropriate ambassador that the foreign power will expect to hear from. Their communication with the foreign power is the primary element that will determine the tenor of any response. Among the 6 great powers, the Asavean plenum claims to be the oldest. They were a major power before the Highborn came to what is now the Empire. Old Asavean was once the language of international diplomacy, reflecting the influence the Asaveans had across the known world. Today, their power is much reduced, their society fallen into decadence and introspection, but they are still known for both their political acumen and their ruthlessness in the face of any attempt to challenge their power. The Asavean ambassador to the Empire is the venerable Lady Madriana of the Bluestones, a highly placed diplomat who reports directly to the plenum. She has a reputation for subtlety, but is also known for her pride and her stormy temperament. Of all the ambassadors that deal with the Empire on a regular basis, she is the most pragmatic about matters of bribery, carrying on a tradition that has seen several Imperial ambassadors to Asavea removed from their posts for corruption. Very stormy seas. The Asaveans declared war on the Empire after the attack on Shaloncio. The Empire declared war on Asavea in spring 385 YE. The Asaveans are supporting the Grendel. The arrival of missionaries of the Way has further enraged the Asaveans. Frayed diplomatic relations with the Asaveans were sheltered by the combined attack of the Empire, Sumar, and the Commonwealth on Shaloncio. The city was razed, and any hope of maintaining an already fraught peace with the hostile nation burned with it. The Asaveans declared war shortly after, though the Empire declined to respond in kind until the Asaveans struck back, burning the Isle of Assini, slaughtering the Justicars, and destroying the town of Shantarim. No first-hand account has ever officially been published, but it appears that 3 massive Asavean warships attacked the isle, torching the buildings and murdering almost everyone trapped there, before moving on to do the same to the Corsair port. Since then, the Asaveans have continued to offer direct military support to the Grendel. They have provided 3 powerful warships and their soldiers, OOC represented by 3,000 points of additional force. All their missives to the Empire had been consistent. They would not rest until they had burned an Imperial city, in revenge for Shaloncio. But it appears they had to wait for the Grendel before they could act. As soon as the peace treaty with the Orcs ended, their warships accompanied the Grendel in the assault on Sirok, finally claiming their vengeance by firing the city. After the attack on Sirok, there was a brief attempt to explore a possible détente. The Asaveans confirmed they were prepared to consider a pathway to peace. The plenum expected the Senate to publicly accept their part in the destruction of Shaloncio with a clearly worded motion that acknowledged that the Empire initiated hostilities and that they were to blame for what occurred since then. If that happened, they promised the plenum would respond to that with a clear statement that they considered the burning of Sirok was punishment enough for the Empire's mistakes, and that they considered the matter settled. That could have opened a route to negotiate and an end to the war. Any chance of success was dashed by the appearance in Asavea of scores of Imperial missionaries attempting to spread the way. The Asaveans worship their own pantheon of gods, and their priests play an important civil role in their society, somewhat reminiscent of the Empire's civil service. As a consequence, the Asaveans have viewed any attempt to spread the way there as a direct attack on their society, and they have responded with stark brutality, executing any missionaries they can catch. The situation is further complicated by the fact that the Way is closely associated in the minds of most citizens with their enemies in Sumar and with the slave class, neither of which incline the average Asavean to welcome Imperial wayfarers. In their communication with the Empire last season, they were explicit that there would be no possibility of peace while the Empire continued to attack them in this way. Since that assurance has not been forthcoming, indeed quite the opposite, the Asaveans have made it clear that they will continue to propagate their war against the Empire and continue to support the Grendel. Warships and mercenaries. Asavean mercenaries are supporting the Grendel in the Bay of Katazar. Since declaring war on the Empire, the Asavean plenum has sent 3 great warships to the Bay of Katazar: Balor's Grace, Leaping Bull, and Wind Tamer. Each of these massive ships, and the smaller vessels that support it, is a significant threat, equivalent to 1,000 strength when supporting a navy. They have been identified supporting the Grendel navies in Madruga, but they are also capable of independent action. For example, they were also responsible for destroying the Isle of Assini and the Corsair town of Shantarim. If rumour is to be believed, they did so at the behest of Governor Rahab of Feroz. There are also Asavean troops fighting alongside the Grendel, both mercenary companies with the Bone Nautilus and smaller warbands supporting other armies. News has recently reached the civil service that 2 more Asavean warships, Breath of Crimson and Foam Dancer, have been spotted docking at Dovetreg resupplying after their long journey east from the archipelago. It appears the plenum are taking their commitment to help the Broken Shore Orcs in their war against the Empire very seriously. Hoist sails. The plenum are threatening to attack any ship trading with the Empire if the Empire continues sending missionaries to Asavea. If they carry out the threat, fleets will gain 1 rank when trading with Sumar, the Commonwealth, and the Sarkafan Delves. Imperial taxation will suffer, dropping by 62 thrones. In response to the ambassador's latest correspondence, the Asaveans are threatening to place a bounty on any fleet trading with the Empire. They claim that priests of Vabar, the mistress of the tides of the sun and the moon, will provide blessings to any Asavean vessel prepared to attack any ship coming to or departing from Imperial ports, seeking to capture the ship, steal their cargo, and enslave their crews. The move is risky and likely to escalate the conflict. The Sarkhan Delves are unlikely to do more than protest the move, but the Commonwealth will be a different matter. Asavea are in conflict with the Sumar and recently declared war on the Empire. Their actions risk dragging the Commonwealth into the war. However, the Asaveans may believe it is worth the price. The Commonwealth, like the Empire, has few navies and relatively few fleets. If the Asaveans make good on their threat, the impacts will be dramatic. The Asaveans won't enter the Bay of Katazar in force, but they can impose a heavy toll on Imperial trade elsewhere. There will be noticeably fewer Sumash, Commonwealth and Sarkhan merchant ships reaching Imperial ports, either because they've been captured by the Asaveans or because they've gone elsewhere in search of safer profits. That means that the benefits the Empire obtains from trade with these three nations will be impacted for as long as the embargo persists. That will mean an ongoing loss to the Imperial Treasury, estimated at 62 thrones this season, for as long as the attacks last. Somewhat perversely, Imperial fleets trading with Sumar, the Commonwealth or Sarkhan Delves will see a small boost to their profits, gaining the equivalent of a single rank. Imperial goods will become harder to obtain in these ports, improving demand and profits. This action will not be without cost to the plenum. They will be paying the equivalent of up to 100 thrones a season in bounties, to say nothing of the diplomatic repercussions of attacking another nation's shipping. The fact that they seem to be prepared to swallow these costs is evidence of just how seriously they take the threat posed by Imperial missionaries, and a taste of what they might do to fight back as the threat grows more real. Wet wood. Imperial efforts to spread the way to Asavea may take as long as a decade to bear fruit. Missionaries will generate opportunities over time that require significant investment from the Empire to succeed. If the Empire triumphs, it will ultimately result in an uprising that threatens the rule of the plenum. The plenum will fight back to prevent that happening. They will commit increasingly significant resources to fighting the Empire over time. Imperial efforts to spread the way to Asavea face a number of significant barriers. The first is the ruthless opposition of the plenum. Any missionaries that are caught are declared to be enemies of the state and very publicly executed. That presents a logistical challenge in that it limits the number of priests willing to risk the journey. It is hard for them to enter the country and impossible to openly preach the way of virtue. Success is not completely out of the question, however. Much of the conflict with Asavea has stemmed from their use of slavery and their refusal to give up the practice. Asaveans are mostly loyal to their plenum, at least in theory, and more importantly, there has been no evidence of any significant support for the Empire all the way since the attack on Shalonsio. It is a different matter with their slaves. Those who are kept in chains are forced to work for their Asavean masters and are a more receptive audience. As evidenced by the Free Folk, a number of slaves already follow versions of the way, likely relics of previous efforts by the Sumar, and to a lesser degree the Empire, to bring them news of the virtues. It would be unwise to imagine that there is a burning desire among the majority of the Asavean citizenry to convert to the way, however, not when discovery brings certain death. It is possible for the Empire to make some progress converting Asaveans, slaves and otherwise, to the way, but it is going to take years of work to have any lasting effect. Any outcome is uncertain, certainly in the short term, not least because almost all the potential converts are powerless and those who do not have too much to lose by making their hidden faith public. In theory, the Empire might one day hope to incite a rebellion or uprising similar to that led by Thrace, but there is no guarantee that it would end in victory for anyone other than the plenum. What the Empire can expect if they continue on the current course is that attempts to convert Asavea will in theory take a decade or more to produce a decisive outcome. In that time there will be periods where nothing seems to improve, but it will be punctuated by sporadic opportunities to intervene more directly to advance the cause. Such opportunities will be costly, and require a great commitment, and without them, the long-term ambition will fail. But if the Empire is able to stay the course, and intervene decisively when opportunities arrive, then they will be able to spread the way to Asavea. That will inevitably result in turmoil in the nation. There is no way that the Empire can successfully spread the way to Asavea without inciting a rebellion against the rule of the plenum and the priesthood. If the Empire can commit to supporting that rebellion when it comes, then it will succeed, but the costs will be huge. The rebels will have nothing, and will need hundreds of wains of mithril and weirwood to arm themselves. If that happens, then it is possible the plenum will be forced to agree terms with the rebels or else be overthrown. If the Imperial prognosticators can see that fate, so can the magicians and priests who serve the plenum. Their ambassador, Lady Madriana of the Blue Stones, has been clear that attempting to spread the way to their lands is considered to be a direct attack on the rule of the plenum. They have responded with limited aid and support for the Grendel, but the greater the threat posed by Imperial missionaries, the harder the plenum will fight back. The Asaveans are not a minor power like the Grendel or the Yutun. Precise calculations are difficult, but Imperial civil servants estimate that they have as many as 24 navies and 12 armies. They can't easily bring that force to bear directly against the Empire, not least because their forces are required to defend their own lands, just as the Empire's forces are. But a rebellion against the rule of the plenum is an existential threat to their rule. The Empire must expect them to respond accordingly. The Asavean warships currently in the Bay of Katazar are the tip of the iceberg in terms of what they can offer to help the Empire's enemies. And they are able to strike back in other ways, as their new threat to attack Imperial fleets demonstrates. While the way in Asavea is much more common than initially believed, there are 3 things it is not. It is not accepted. The priests and the plenum families suppress the way wherever they can. Their experiment with the Temple of the Seven Virtues in Nemoria is seen as an unmitigated disaster even before the crazy priest pulled the structure down on the foolish people he'd lured to their doom with talk of spiritual mysteries. It is not unified. The sects are underground, and the same tactics that help them hide from the jealous priesthood mean they are also hidden from each other. And it is not orthodox. All save those sects directly influenced by Sumar are riddled with peculiar beliefs that border on heresy or blasphemy, likely because after the initial inspiration the believers of Asavea have been left to find their own way. Parts of speech, Spring 386YE Wind of Fortune. Matters of salvation. Imperial missionaries and wayfarers continue to travel to Asavea. Inspired by several mandates enacted during the winter solstice, Imperial missionaries, especially highborn wayfarers, continue to travel to Asavea. As recounted last season, they have begun to make contact with sects across the archipelago that, to one degree or another, embrace the idea of the virtues and the way. Many of these sects have ideas that might be at best considered odd, and at worst outright blasphemous or heretical. But with all save the most extreme, there are points of similarity with the way as it is practiced in the Empire and in Sumar. Travelling to the archipelago is dangerous. Every priest who chooses to do so risks not only their own lives, but the lives of the sects they seek to support, the lives of anyone who might be receptive to their words. The Asavean priesthood refuses to see its power challenged. The plenum refuses to allow outsiders to destabilise its comfortable status quo. During the summer solstice, the Imperial Synod built on the mandates that had set the missionaries sailing with statements of principle that make it clear that Imperial priests are far from done with Asavea and not content to rest on their laurels. There is an appetite for statements that urge people to support virtuous causes, and this is reflected with the enthusiasm that these judgments have been met with. Even the 2 judgments that did not quite achieve a greater majority, those raised by Lenarius Ancarian and Athiel Westbourne of the Cenotaph, were still upheld by significant margins, demonstrating the Synod's appetite for continuing the work begun after the winter solstice in spite of the risks. 5 other statements, however, did achieve greater majorities in their respective assemblies. With the eyes of many Imperial priests looking beyond the Empire's borders, and with both the Assembly of the Way and the Assembly of Loyalty in particular attracting additional attention due to recent events, the clamour of voices calling for a continued involvement in the West is difficult to ignore. Note: Assembly of the Way. Several of these mandates can be enacted by either the Assembly of the Way or the General Assembly. In these cases, this represents additional interest in the Assembly as priests who speak with authority on matters of doctrine. They also have some capacity to speak to priests who do not prioritise one virtue, but rather focus on the way as a whole, who are often drawn to the role of missionary and the wayfarer. A fulcrum. The Imperial Synod could build on early successes and continue to support the spread of the way in Asavea. These mandates would create an avenue for Imperial citizens to send white granite and money to the Asavean sects. The Empire has made contact with several sects, but what now? The opportunity exists for the Synod to undertake a mandate that commits them to the course of continuing their missionary work. More importantly, it will encourage Imperial citizens to make concrete contributions towards building the way in Asavea. The fire of virtue smoulders on the archipelago. It is our duty to nurture this flame. We send named priest with 100 Lao to show Asavea that the power of virtue exalts all. Synod mandate, Assembly of the Way, or General Assembly. If this mandate is passed, it will allow Imperial citizens to provide the pilgrims of Asavea with the resources they need. Missionaries will work to identify sects. Large amounts of white granite will help them to establish shrines and meeting places, either in secret or in places where they can resist the attention of the plenum. Large amounts of money will help them secure the other materials they need, pay captains, or help to get the wains to Asavea under the noses of the Asavean government. It will ultimately help the faithful become more than a number of scattered, isolated sects meeting in cellars and warehouses, scrabbling for Lao and ways to preserve their teachings. A special commission will be established, and any Imperial citizen will be able to contribute white granite and money to it. Once the project is complete, it will establish the way as a credible threat to the status quo in Asavea. There is no guarantee it will be able to overthrow the plenum or the stranglehold the priesthood has over the populace, but it will create a foundation that will help them build towards those outcomes. It will lead to future opportunities to support the Pilgrims of the Way, further opportunities to invest, and further opportunities to achieve the ambition of bringing the Way to Asavea. The way is clear. While the General Assembly, or the Assembly of the Way, might urge the Empire to aid in Asavea, there is another alternative. While there are missionaries in every nation, Highguard has entire sects of people, wayfarers, who have worked tirelessly for centuries to spread the Way and support pilgrims in other nations. They were instrumental in bringing the Way not only to imperial nations, but to the Sumer Republic. Highguard also has large numbers of virtuous benefactors with access to white granite. At the moment, much of that white granite is committed to the construction of the grand inspiration of the Way in Bastion. However, while the glorious city is a truly ambitious undertaking, there are some in Highguard who believe that a better symbol of the Way would be to repeat the success in Sumer and bring salvation to the souls of Asavea. With that in mind, the Highborn Assembly could enact the following mandate. The souls of Asavea cry out for salvation. Now is the time to reach out to those who need our guidance, to find a way or to make one. We send named priest with 100 Lao to urge every Highborn to show the Asaveans that the power of virtue exalts all. Synod Mandate, Highborn Assembly. If this mandate is enacted, it will establish the commission above, even if the General Assembly or the Assembly of the Way do not. More importantly, however, it will stop the flow of white granite and crowns to the Grand Inspiration. Instead, those materials will be directed towards establishing and supporting the Pilgrims of the Way in Asavea, 25 wains of white granite and 50 crowns each season. Where Highguard leads, others would be able to follow. This mandate still creates the opportunity for other imperial citizens to contribute wains and money to support the commission regardless of what nation they belong to. Under normal circumstances, a mandate urging Highguard to abandon the Holy City would end the flow of materials to the commission, and it would be a devastating blow to the pride and ambition of the nation. In this particular case, however, it would be clear to every Highborn that this is not an abrogation of the ambition to build the grand inspiration of the Way. It is a virtuous decision to bring salvation to hundreds of thousands of souls. That is an ambition every bit as monumental as the original decision to support the Holy City. Everyone will understand and appreciate why the Assembly might make this choice. A decision to abandon the Holy City for some lesser goal, something less ambitious, would be a devastating blow to the nation's spirit, but this choice is fundamentally different because of the magnitude of what is being proposed. It is every bit the equal of the Holy City. A long enough lever. The Assembly of Loyalty could urge the virtuous to consider other ways to support the spread of the Way in Asavea. Many priests are watching the Loyalty Assembly with interest. The statement of principle proposed by Sufjani Uri y Irigo attracts interest of not only priests of loyalty, but pilgrims across the empire. While there are grand plans to support the missionary efforts, the freeborn statement intrigues some of those most committed to the idea of finding other ways to help the sects in Asavea. The Assembly of Loyalty could support the following mandate. Even the most impenetrable forest may fall one tree at a time. We send named priest with 50 doses of Lao to urge those loyal to our young siblings in virtue to spread the Way and support the virtuous rebels in Asavea. Synod Mandate, Loyalty Assembly. If this mandate is passed, it will encourage imperial citizens to find other ways to support the virtuous rebels in Asavea. Those whose virtue inclines them to support the Asaveans, especially dedicants of loyalty, wisdom and courage, will be encouraged to propose opportunities to aid the Wayist sects in both spreading the faith and in resisting or disrupting the Asavean government. Such opportunities are likely to be costly and will not be a replacement for the commission already proposed, but might build on that opportunity. Price of a soul. The Freeborn Assembly can pass a mandate to encourage corsairs and fleet captains to offer their services to those travelling to or sending support to Asavea. Dayanara y Cabeza y Arrigo proposed a statement upheld by the Freeborn Assembly that spoke directly to the beleaguered people of the Brass Coast. Despite the problems besetting their people, the words catch the hearts of many. One of the challenges faced with travelling to Asavea and supporting the sects there is actually getting to the archipelago without being caught and executed by the plenum. Whatever else they might do, the Freeborn can certainly help with that problem. The Freeborn Assembly could support the following mandate. Do not fear to act, only be shamed by inaction. We send named priest with 50 Lao to urge our ship captains to ensure the aid offered to the people of Asavea reaches their shores. Synod Mandate, Freeborn Assembly. If this mandate is passed, then its effect would be twofold. Firstly, it will encourage freeborn fleet captains to seek out missionaries to get them to Asavea, and not only to the easily accessible islands. With corsair audacity and skill, they will be able to ensure missionaries and wayfarers are able to reach every part of that foreign nation. More importantly, their skill will ensure that wherever possible, those missionaries arrive safely, ready to avoid the plenum and the Asavean priesthood. It won't save everyone, but it will reduce the number of lives lost and the number of people who are captured before they're able to do anything. It will also provide the Freeborn with a new adventure, available only to them. Smuggle the way to Asavea will be found in the Spy Network dropdown. It involves stealth and subtlety rather than confronting Asavean ships. The Freeborn understand that anything worth doing is worth being paid for, and while they may be generous with the prices they charge for transporting priests, Lao, and materials to Asavea, they'll also look for opportunities to get recompense in the archipelago. As such, a standard fleet will receive 2 ingots of orichalcum, 2 measures of iridescent gloaming, and 60 rings, representing luxury goods and payment from passengers. A fleet that has been upgraded or enchanted with a ritual such as muffled ore will receive more rewards. It will also establish that there are freeborn ships in Asavea which may open the door to future opportunities for the Brass Coast. Now is not the time. The Senate may intervene to put a stop to missionaries preaching in Asavea. As long as there are missionaries taking the way to Asavea, openly supporting rebels and slaves and undermining the rule of the plenum, there will be no opportunity for peace. The Asaveans will continue to escalate in the face of what would ultimately be an existential threat. It is unlikely to be popular, but the Imperial Senate might choose to step in if they judge the threat to the Empire outweighs the ambition of the Imperial Synod. The Empire could pass a law making it illegal to preach the way in Asavea. This would be similar to a law such as the one criminalising the sale of Lao to the Iron Confederacy. If such a law were passed, it would bring an end to the involvement of the Imperial Synod in Asavea. A few missionaries might still take the trip to the archipelago, but their impact would be negligible. Any future opportunities to support Asavean sects would be covert, limited in scope, and open anyone participating in them to prosecution. It's not clear what would happen if the Senate passed such a law at the summer solstice and an assembly enacted one of the mandates presented here, but such an assembly would certainly be in breach of the new law, and the impact of that mandate would be greatly reduced. However, this would also represent a serious conflict between the Senate and the Synod that might prove difficult to de-escalate. The grandest ambition. The Ambition Assembly has called for missionaries to fan the sparks of the way throughout the world. Finally, Eli of the Cenotaph raised a statement of principle in the Ambition Assembly that was not specifically aimed at Asavea, but sought to build on what had been achieved there. It is perhaps appropriate that the assembly that celebrates reaching for the stars has its dedicants of ambition look to the horizon. The whole of creation will one day be united in the way, suggests Eli. Ambitious of the Empire, we should lead the charge in this matter. The statement calls for priests, especially of ambition, to look beyond Asavea and seek out existing sects and people open to the teachings of the way all over the world. By itself, the Ambition Assembly would struggle to create the kind of response that has been seen in Asavea and with the doctrine of enlightenment. However, the priests of the Ambition Assembly may be moved to try and encourage other priests who share their vision to help them make it a reality, by passing and enacting a mandate in either the General Assembly or the Assembly of the Way. One day we will unite the world in the way. We send named priest with 150 doses of Lao to urge imperial citizens to spread the way to the whole of creation. Consequences are the price of ambition. Synod mandate, Assembly of the Way or General Assembly. If this mandate is passed, it will build on recent missionary work. Imperial missionaries, both lay pilgrims and priests alike, will spread out from the Empire to every known nation. They will go to the Principalities of Yarm, the Sarkovan Delves, the Commonwealth, Faradon, the Iron Confederacy, Axos, and Odkodov. Some may even risk everything by travelling to the lands of the Grendel. After all, the Orcs of the Broken Shore are arguably less hostile to the Way than the Asaveans are. In almost every nation, pilgrims will either make contact with local sects who already follow the Way, or find people who are amenable to its message. There is no way to do this secretly. Every nation in the known world will be aware that imperial priests have come to spread their faith and to encourage those of their own citizens who already practice the Way. Nations such as Axos, Yarm, and Odkodov will see this as a direct challenge to their sovereignty. It will be impossible to avoid major diplomatic incidents. Even nations that are friendly to the Empire, such as the Commonwealth and the Sarkovan Delves, will not take well to this infringement of the freedom of religion those nations encourage, and it will likely sour diplomatic relations there as well. On the other hand, over the course of the next year, there will certainly be opportunities for imperial citizens to help establish and strengthen the Way in other nations. Not every nation will offer opportunities, and few of these opportunities will be cheap or easy to take advantage of. But whatever else happens, the Empire will get a much better understanding of how the Way is viewed and practiced in other nations, or at least some of the challenges associated with attempting to convert the people there. And it will mean that nobody will be left with any doubt that the Empire is serious about its ambition to unite the world under the Way. It's worth noting that while alternative words might be presented for this mandate, one thing that will be unsuccessful is trying to pick and choose some of those foreign nations over others. A mandate to only focus on a single nation might be effective, but attempts to cherry-pick the nations to send missionaries to will fail to enthuse the people of the Empire at this time. Limitations. As with all mandates, any of the mandates presented here that do not achieve a greater majority will not influence the people of Varushka or Urizen. Player characters will be able to contribute wains or money to the Special Commission if it is enacted, but the mandate won't lead to any further opportunities for those nations. Other weapons. Conjunction. A company of Grendel are moving to raise the Academy of Arms. This skirmish is a combat highly likely encounter. The prelate of Adalmar's shrine is responsible for defeating the Grendel. A warship of the Grendel has landed on the shores of Nerys, allowing a company of Grendel accompanied by a small contingent of Assaveans to disembark. The group move with purpose, ignoring several wealthy spires that would make easy targets. According to the intelligence the Empire have received, the Assaveans have been urging their Grendel allies to attack sites of religious importance in the Empire, especially those dedicated to exemplars and paragons of the way, and most especially to those recognised by their enemies in Sumar, seeking retribution for the Empire sending missionaries to their shores to try and convert their people. It appears this group of raiders are part of that new plan, and they are advancing on the Academy of Arms. If the Assaveans and their accompanying company of Grendel are not defeated, then they will not only slaughter any of the pilgrims they encounter on their journey to the Academy, but they will also slaughter the students there, destroying the Palestra and rendering it unusable until it is properly restored. Given that this represents a threat to the Academy of Arms and the pilgrims, it is the responsibility of the incumbent prelate of Adalmar's shrine, Limonos of the Astral Observatory, to defeat the Grendel and the Assaveans.